The fifth Democratic debate featured Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, and Tom Steyer. The event was held at Tyler Perry's studios in Atlanta and hosted by MSNBC and The Washington Post. While the November debate had far less discussion about healthcare than previous debates, and was nevertheless made up significantly, particularly in the first 30 minutes, of stump speeches and discussions that, at this point, we've heard over and over again, the debate did have plenty of decisive moments, one-liners, gaffes, and heated exchanges.
Now, my first move was not to run for president of the United States, because I am not insane.
I thought you might have been high when you said it.
If you notice, I have more people supporting me in the black community. The only African-American woman that ever been elected to the United States Senate.
In the coming days, I'll give you a breakdown of what I took to be the most significant moments in the fifth debate, but for now, I want to talk about the winners and losers, who likely gained momentum from the event and who hurt their campaign. So who lost the fifth Democratic debate, who made little difference to their current status, and who won. Between the fourth and fifth debate, RCP's national polling averages showed little major changes for the top contenders. Biden remained in first place, Warren in second, Bernie in third, and Buttigieg in fourth. But in terms of the early polling states, we saw strong signals for Mayor Pete, taking first place in Iowa and surging in New Hampshire. Given this, you might expect a huge target on Pete's back, especially given the fact that he had opened himself up to plenty of criticism. Newsweek put it this way: all three women senators were expected to come out swinging against Buttigieg. Warren in response to his jabs about her paying for Medicare for all in October, Klobuchar over the issue of sexism that she intimated had favored the city mayor, and Harris over a Buttigieg campaign misstep that saw a stock photo of a Kenyan woman used to illustrate an African-American woman on his website. But regardless of this, few attempted to take a swing at Buttigieg. Biden too, despite continuing to lead nationwide, was largely ignored, but he did manage to land a number of blows on himself. One way Biden damaged himself in this debate came before the event even began, with Biden's campaign sending out a fundraising email that was apparently meant to be sent out after the evening had concluded. Biden's strongest moment was when he made an argument about his own electability, or perceived electability by the current president. Talking about the Ukraine call and impeachment proceedings, Biden claimed, "I learned number one that Donald Trump doesn't want me to be the nominee. That much is clear." But Biden was shaky from the start, and that carried through much of the evening. His energy was perceptibly lower than usual, and like usual, he fumbled to find the right words, which never seemed to come. The wrong words did, however. Speaking about violence against women, Biden said we needed to change the culture, and keep punching at it, and punching at it, and punching at it. When nervous laughter erupted, he didn't seem to follow what was happening, adding, "No, I really mean it." But this was not his only big stumble. He also said while speaking to Cory Booker,
I come out of the black community in terms of my support.
Strange phrasing there. He also insisted that he was supported by the only black woman to be elected to the Senate, which is of course insane, as more than one have been elected, and currently a black woman elected to the Senate, Kamala Harris, is running against him. These strange Biden gaffes came directly after the VP got a body blow from an unlikely suspect, Cory Booker, who said of Biden opposing legalization of weed, "I thought you might be high when you said it," before going on to explain that the enforcement of those drugs has been selective and harms that community, the one that Biden happens to have come out of, in terms of his support. This was a definitive loss for Joe Biden. Cory Booker's attack against Joe Biden was the first thing the Washington Post went back to in their post-debate coverage, and I suspect it will be one of the most rewatched moments from this debate. This would be enough to secure a win for Booker, barring another big embarrassing moment or overall weakness throughout the debate. But no one seemed to even think of going after him throughout the event, and he managed to secure a surprisingly large amount of speaking time for a relatively low polling candidate. 11.5 minutes according to the Washington Post's tracker, which puts him above the nationwide frontrunner. This debate was a clear win for Cory Booker. Kamala Harris seemed more energized and charismatic in this debate than she had in the previous couple. Still, her performance was far from perfect. At one point, she was teed up by the moderators to take down Pete Buttigieg on racial issues. She didn't exactly make the most of the opportunity. Instead, she backed down from the conflict, largely taking Pete's side. Her refusal to spar with Pete was a notch in his belt and a missed opportunity for her. More definitive, of course, was her heated exchange with Tulsi Gabbard. Kamala's attacks on Gabbard seemed to be mistimed by a matter of months. They seemed to be everything she wished she had said in the moment when Gabbard first went after her record as Attorney General of California. Responding now is, in my view, too little, too late, and really reminded me of the shrimp episode of Seinfeld.
Wait. Yes! That's what I should have said! No!
This was a mild loss for Kamala Harris. Gabbard's exchange with Kamala Harris did not make Harris look good, but that does not mean that Gabbard got the best of her either. Her responses to Harris were fine, but not amazing. Both seemed to be flinging mud, dealing damage without properly deflecting. Gabbard may have helped herself a bit by talking about her own military experience, but didn't convincingly counter on Harris's claims that she refused to call war criminals associated with Steve Bannon, and was overly critical of President Obama. But that exchange at least began quite favorably for Gabbard, as MSNBC asked Gabbard about her criticisms of Clinton and the rot in the Democratic Party. That MSNBC promoted the Clinton versus Gabbard narrative was, all in all, a great thing for her campaign. Clinton, it will probably surprise the mainstream media to hear, is deeply unpopular with ordinary Americans. And Tulsi Gabbard earned deep respect amongst anti-establishment Democratic voters for her willingness to stand up against the table-tilting of the DNC and corruption of Clinton's 2016 campaign. It also helped that Gabbard had a strong answer, explaining how pressures like lobbying and the military-industrial complex have steered the Democratic Party away from the interests of ordinary Americans. Gabbard, of course, also had very heated exchanges with Pete Buttigieg. The most memorable line that came out of this was probably Pete's line, "Do you seriously think anyone on this stage is proposing invading Mexico?" This clearly distorted the meaning of what Gabbard was attempting to say, as her criticism was plainly that Pete proposed to send troops to Mexico to help fight the cartels.
Your recent careless statement about how you as president would be willing to send our troops to Mexico to fight the cartels.
But despite the dishonesty of his characterization of her statement, that's likely what viewers will walk away remembering. What will stick in their heads is the mischaracterization itself, which is bad news for Gabbard. Overall, while Gabbard had plenty of pep and was plenty aggressive in this debate, both good things, I don't think she had any clean wins in her heated exchanges. She lost her exchange with Pete, mostly on rhetorical force, and her assault on Harris was weaker than past critiques of the senator. Overall, I'm not seeing how this debate was a win for Gabbard. While Pete Buttigieg more or less won his exchange with Tulsi Gabbard, this does not secure him a win automatically. In general, his tone seemed more negative in this debate, and he was even called out on a lie by the Washington Post's debate fact check.
The president had to confess in writing, in court, to illegally diverting charitable contributions that were supposed to go to veterans.
What did help Buttigieg was the fact that, despite surging in the polls, most candidates skipped out on their opportunities to attack him. Harris avoided a confrontation that was handed to her on a silver platter by the moderators. Warren totally left him be, and Klobuchar turned what could have been a serious takedown into a mild tweak. After moderators asked her about comments she had made about Pete's experience and higher expectations for women, Klobuchar backed away, making it more of a systemic, historical issue, even though, in terms of experience, Pete is vulnerable. Her backing away cleared the way for him to deliver a clearly prepared stump speech about how South Bend isn't small, Washington infighting is small. Relatively unchallenged despite surging in early primary states, Mayor Pete had a cakewalk during the 5th Democratic debate. He certainly fell short of a perfect performance, but there were no real obstacles for him to stumble over, and as a result, he left the debate pretty much a winner. Bernie Sanders made a critical error in interrupting the debate between Pete Buttigieg and Tulsi Gabbard. However you figure it, that heated exchange could only have helped Sanders. Buttigieg is a rival in terms of polls ranking, and much of Tulsi's following could easily move to the Sanders camp as they are aligned on many issues. The two of them damaging each other is probably a good thing for Sanders, so stopping that exchange was a tactical error. But added to that, he immediately changed the subject from foreign policy when he did so, making it look as if he had not been following what they were saying. It was a Biden-esque moment for him. Another potential tactical problem for Bernie was that despite saying he was a strong supporter of Israel, he also criticized their treatment of the Palestinian people. He was absolutely right to do so, and mild in his language, but I do expect the mainstream media to come down harshly on that, if they bother to discuss it at all. Still, Bernie's overall performance was undeniably strong, if a little predictable. His lines of argument and stump speeches were pretty much the same old Bernie we know, but he suffered no damage inflicted by other candidates, and his one misstep was rather mild and forgettable when compared to the big gaffes we've seen from folks like Biden. Bernie did not have many huge standout moments in this debate, but his generally solid performance will maintain his top-tier position in the race. A surge is not likely, but for now he did well enough to call his performance a win. Like Sanders, Warren generally delivered her typical arguments and speeches, and she too avoided taking damage from opponents, even after getting the chance to speak about her Medicare for All plan. Warren dodged a question about Obama's indirect criticism of left-wing candidates, but this was probably the best option for her, as the moderate former president remains widely admired among Democratic voters. Warren was particularly effective when talking about her visit to the border, as she told a strong story about a nursing mother locked in a cage who had come to the US after fleeing cartels who were after her for giving a police officer something to drink. She also got more speaking time than any other candidate on stage, a full 13.4 minutes. Warren looked like a frontrunner without facing the attacks that a frontrunner tends to face. Hard to call that anything but a win. On the total opposite end of the spectrum in terms of speaking time was Andrew Yang, a middle polling candidate who debate after debate has had less time to talk than anyone else on stage. This time he got just 6.9 minutes of speaking time, less than even Tom Steyer, who in my view should not be taken seriously by anyone. Still, Yang truly made the most of every moment he had, with extremely strong lines. When asked what he would say to Putin if he were elected president, he responded,
Well, first I'd say I'm sorry I beat your guy.
When asked about paid family leave, Yang explained that just two countries, the United States of America and Papua New Guinea, are on the list of countries that did not mandate it. Of that, he remarked, we gotta get off that list. Yang also closed the night with perhaps the strongest closing statement, which featured the sharply funny line, my first thought was not to run for president because I'm not insane. The recurrently overlooked candidate delivered a stellar performance in the 5th Democratic debate. Yang is still far from reaching that top tier of candidates, but given how well he did in his limited time in the 5th Democratic debate, it's hard to see him as anything but a winner. While Amy Klobuchar may have landed a couple of jokes, she was distinctly less powerful than she was in the 4th Democratic debate, a performance I described as not particularly good, but good for Klobuchar. Now she seems to have fallen back towards normal Klobuchar territory. She refused to launch any strong attacks against higher polling candidates, rather weakly backing down from a potential confrontation with Buttigieg, despite really having the potential upper hand in that exchange. She does, after all, have far more experience. But let's be honest, the most talked about Klobuchar issue coming out of this debate was her shaky hair. She was shaking throughout the entire debate, so much so that I sincerely asked whether she had some kind of medical problem. I don't happen to be a fan of Klobuchar's centrist message, but my criticism of this very superficial issue is not a unique one I've saved for someone not in my ideological camp. After the 3rd debate, I called Sanders a debate loser simply because he had a hoarse voice which projected the wrong image. Similarly, I have to call out Klobuchar's shakes. Whatever their cause, the non-verbal message was clear. She looked nervous and weak. It may not be fair to blame someone for a minor performance issue, but in the game of politics, image is a big deal. Klobuchar's performance was both literally and figuratively shaky, an obvious loss. Little was noteworthy about Tom Steyer's performance, which matches nicely with his unremarkable candidacy. He wore the same tie as he did in the 4th Democratic debate. That may be the most interesting thing that can be said about him. Steyer also said during the debate that he would be the only candidate to make climate change his #1 issue. Much to his shock and dismay, Biden responded moments later that climate change is the #1 issue. Rather than move on from this embarrassing moment, Steyer reminded everyone of it in his closing statement. Apparently unable to edit his prepared remarks, the billionaire, who used a small fortune of his own money to buy his way on stage, repeated the now demonstrably false claim that he was the only person who would make climate change his #1 issue. Steyer is, in fact, not unique in his concern for the environment, not remotely. The true candidate for the environment was Jay Inslee, who has already left the race after his experience as governor was not sufficient to make him a top contender. What actually distinguishes Steyer from the other candidates is not his policy positions, or even his vast wealth, particularly not with Bloomberg considering a run. No, what makes Steyer stand out is he is by far the most clownish, universally reviled, and uninspiring candidate in the race. Now, I don't want to just bash him. The fact that he's done plenty of philanthropy is an indication that he may very well be a wonderful, pure of heart human being. Steyer may be a great person, but this isn't personal. This is a race for the Democratic nomination for the President of the United States. Steyer has never held a public office. He's never come up with an original policy idea. He's not particularly charismatic or charming or strong. Nothing about him indicates that he would be prepared for the presidency, nor even to go toe-to-toe against Trump in a general election. Assuming that he is a good person on the inside, I wish only good things to happen to him, and for that reason hope that he drops out of the race soon, because it looks like things are only going to get tougher for him, not easier. Were Steyer to somehow manage to buy his way into securing the Democratic nomination, I largely expect that Trump, or any GOP nominee, would, after the general election, relatively effortlessly make themselves the answer to this question.
Well, the jerk store called. They're running out of you.